Greetings and welcome to Nerd College, your source for introductions to a variety of films, shows, and anime. Our goal is to provide a little background information so our viewers can decide for themselves if they'd like to dive in further. With all that out of the way, let's get into it.
Oh, this place is magical.
Studio Ghibli is a Japanese animation company based in Western Tokyo and is known for creating some of the most endearing and artistically beautiful films ever made. It was founded in 1985 by Hayao Miyazaki, Isao Takahata, and Toshio Suzuki after the success of the film adaptation of Miyazaki's manga, Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. They would go on to produce over 20 feature films to date, along with a great many short films, commercials, and even animation for video games. Although their works are rooted in Japanese culture, they possess universal themes that have resonated with audiences the world over. Today, Studio Ghibli has a dedicated museum, amusement park, and more merchandise than could ever be accounted for. We'll be taking a look at the studio's history, some examples of their work, and some background information on the life of the studio's most prodigious artist and director. Hayao Miyazaki was born January 5, 1941, is credited as director of 12 feature-length animated films and dozens of other projects, and is widely regarded as a master storyteller and one of the most accomplished animators of all time. His art is known for its blending of the realistic and the supernatural, and for its themes regarding the advancement of technology and how that relates to nature and spiritualism. Miyazaki's films also commonly feature female protagonists who display great acts of bravery and through the course of the story learn to stand on their own despite incredible circumstances. In his own words, "Many of my movies have strong female leads, brave, self-sufficient girls that don't think twice about fighting for what they believe with all their heart. They'll need a friend or a supporter, but never a savior. Any woman is just as capable of being a hero as any man." Another recurring characteristic of Miyazaki's films is flight, and there are a great many examples of flying machines and characters that take to the sky through other means in his work. His love of aviation began early in his life growing up around planes. His father, Katsuji Miyazaki, was the director of Miyazaki Airplane, which manufactured parts for fighter planes during World War II. Young Hayao would spend his days drawing airplanes and fantasizing about the sky, and he continues to do so to this day. Early in his life, his family was required to move around the country due to the events of the war. In 1945, the Miyazaki family was forced to evacuate their home due to aerial assaults, and some of Hayao's earliest memories are of bombed-out cities. Beginning in 1947, his mother would take ill, and he and his siblings had to take over the domestic duties of the house. Looking at his films, it's easy to see how these experiences influenced Miyazaki and his values later in life. He gained his first official position as an animator in 1963 as an in-between artist for Toei, where he worked on a great number of projects. Eventually, he became dissatisfied with his assignments and moved on to work for other animation studios. Miyazaki would land his first job as co-director along with Isao Takahata, who would become his longtime friend and collaborator with the anime series Lupin III Part 1. The first animated film he would direct would also be one for the Lupin franchise and was called The Castle of Cagliostro, which premiered in 1979. A few years later, he was encouraged to create a manga that would later be called Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind, although at the time, Miyazaki insisted on the condition that it would not be adapted into a film. However, after initial refusals, and during a time in which there were no other long-form projects in production, he eventually gave in and began work on a feature film based on the manga. The movie adaptation of Nausicaä was extremely well received by critics and audiences alike, and to this day it's frequently ranked as one of the best and most influential anime films of all time. Here we can clearly see Miyazaki's style on full display. quality animation with a rich storyline featuring a strong female protagonist living in a war-torn world, who throughout the course of the film shows her fellow villagers the importance of living alongside nature. With the success of the film, Miyazaki and Takahata would finally launch their very own animation studio. Miyazaki chose the name Ghibli after the name of an Italian Saharan scouting plane, which translates to a hot desert wind. For a more detailed breakdown on the pronunciation and the history of the name Ghibli, check out our links in the description below. Toshio Suzuki worked as producer for Studio Ghibli and would join the company full-time starting in 1989. Along with everything else we've mentioned, another characteristic of Studio Ghibli's films that helps set them apart from their contemporaries is their excellent music. Composer Joe Hisaishi produced the score for Nausicaä, and afterward would end up creating the music for the majority of Studio Ghibli's films. In fact, Hisaishi would score all but one of Miyazaki's features, and their relationship has been compared to that of Steven Spielberg and John Williams, or Tim Burton and Danny Elfman. The first film officially released by the fledgling studio was called Castle in the Sky, and once again director Miyazaki's tastes were prominently featured. The film contains an assortment of retro-futuristic flying machines based on 19th century stylings, a strong female character central to the plot, and a discussion of the effects of technology on our world. The film underperformed at Japanese box offices during its initial release, but over time, international sales have soared and the film has reached a high degree of acclaim. Although Hayao Miyazaki is Studio Ghibli's most prominent director, he is not their only one. The next two films would be released together as a double feature in 1988, with My Neighbor Totoro, directed by Miyazaki, and Grave of the Fireflies, directed by fellow Ghibli founder Isao Takahata. The two films are juxtaposed, as Totoro is mostly an adorable story about the importance of nature and family, and Fireflies is a deeply emotional film centered on two orphans who are desperately trying to survive during the final months of the Pacific War. Since their initial release, both films have gone down in history as important and impactful works of anime, and the titular Totoro still features on the studio's logo to this day. Between 1989 and 1995, Studio Ghibli would release 6 more films, and with the exception of 1993's Ocean Waves, each of them was directed or co-directed by either Miyazaki or Takahata. Out of the films released during this time, Kiki's Delivery Service stands out as the most profitable both in box offices as well as later international sales. Although Nausicaä had been released in North America under the name Warriors of the Wind in 1984, Miyazaki was extremely disappointed by how heavily it was edited, and afterward adopted a strict no-edit policy when releasing his films internationally. Then, in 1996, Takuma Shoten formed a partnership with Walt Disney Company, in which Disney would become the sole international distributor for Studio Ghibli's animated films. Miyazaki still held to his no-edits policy, though. Upon hearing that Harvey Weinstein wished to remove scenes from Princess Mononoke, producer Toshio Suzuki presented him with a prop katana and a simple message: no cuts. The film was released in 1997 to critical and commercial acclaim, with all scenes intact.
Ah! Look! Reinforcements! We're doomed! Oh no!
If Yakul's not afraid, then we have nothing to worry about here.
Ah!
In 2001, Studio Ghibli produced what would prove to be its most successful and critically praised film to date, Spirited Away. Not only was it the highest-selling Japanese film in history at the time, it would go on to hold that title for 19 years after its release. The film would win dozens of major awards both domestically and internationally, and was the first non-English language film to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. Afterward, the studio would begin to showcase films from a wider pool of directors, including Miyazaki's own son, Goro. In 2013, Hayao Miyazaki announced his retirement from directing animation, but after a period of 10 years, his passion and creative drive led him to return and create one of his most powerful and emotional films, The Boy and the Heron. This, his latest film, would once again garner international acclaim and earn Miyazaki another Academy Award in 2024.
Kiriko-san.
熟すと飛ぶんだよ。ここんとこずーっと飛べなかったんだ。
The year 2025 marks the 40th anniversary of Studio Ghibli, and in celebration, their most popular films are set to be screened in theaters for a limited time beginning in May. If at all possible, we encourage all our viewers to take this rare opportunity to see these masterpieces on the big screen. Here at the Nerd College, we give the films of Studio Ghibli our highest recommendation. No matter who you are, where you are, or how old you are, we're sure there's a film for you. Since its creation, the studio has fueled the hearts and imaginations of millions of fans and has consistently produced animation that raises the standard for quality and storytelling. As of time of recording, there is still hope that The Boy and the Heron may not be Miyazaki's last film, and fans are optimistic that the future of Studio Ghibli will be a bright one. And that's all we have for today. If you learned something new, subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on our future videos. Make sure to tap the like button and let us know in the comments below if there's a film, show, or anime that you'd like to see covered by our channel. Thank you for watching. Now, off to your next class.